Welcome to the Twist News. I'm Erika Grey. New York City is the greatest city in the United States and one of the greatest cities in the world, but it's also a litmus test for how the rest of the country is doing. So you may say, why would you say it's a litmus test? Because New York City is so great and has such a reputation and such an economy and movers and shakers and all kinds of people at the top of their industries, that if New York City changes, it's an indicator of the decline of the United States. Since COVID, according to NCPR, New York has lost 350,000 citizens. And a lot of these citizens who left are tax-paying citizens. And they fled during the COVID crisis. So this is the beginning of a change in New York City. Plus, many businesses moved out, and you had people who would work in the office buildings now working from home. So what do you have in New York today but a 54% vacancy in commercial real estate in New York City? But as a result of this exodus, in 2020, Reuters reported that $34 billion left New York City. $34 billion in lost income. But this wasn't all. In August of 2023, the New York Post reported 160 Wall Street firms left Wall Street, many of them exiting for Florida. And this cost the city $1 trillion. In April of 2023, the New York Post reported that about 27% of New Yorkers are intending on leaving the city. But then came the migrant crisis, which started out slowly. And then before you know it, there now are 115,000 migrants that have moved into New York. And 115,000 migrants represents a third of the people who left. And now that number of refugees, many who are on the public doles, initially they're all taking assistance, and now you have many tax-paying New Yorkers who have left and poor who have moved in. But there's a decision that Mayor Adams has just made, which is going to complete the destruction of New York. Now, he's worried about the migrants destroying New York. Let's look at his decision. But before we do, I want to comment that I've been around the cities around the world recently. They're all booming. Whether you go to Paris, Rome, Strasbourg, these are the cities I've been in, Brussels, Cologne, Zurich. But you go to New York, and New York streets are dead. At least the streets I've gone on, it's shocking that Times Square area has traffic. Some days Grand Central has traffic. But I have been riding plenty of trains that are half full and don't have the number of people sitting in them that once were sitting in the seats on these trains. And it's so much of a difference that Connecticut is going to raise its fares because it now consistently has 1/3 less of the ridership going into New York City. And Connecticut has something worked with the MTA. And so now Connecticut is going to raise fares because of the loss of ridership going into Manhattan. But Mayor Adams wants to take the commercial properties and turn them into affordable housing. And over the next decade, he's going to build 500,000 units. That's 500,000 units of affordable housing. Now, what is affordable housing? Affordable housing is a term, and the exact definition I'm going to read to you. Affordable housing is housing that is affordable to those with a household income at or below the median. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development defines affordable housing as housing where the occupant is paying 30% or less of the gross income on total housing, including utilities. Affordable housing is available to households who otherwise could not house themselves. For example, because they would struggle to afford the cost of housing in the open market. So affordable housing is essentially low-income housing. The mayor is taking a lot of steps. He's changing zoning and all kinds of hindrances to the housing being built, but there's going to be a lot of this, but this will be affordable housing. And then there is the Universal Affordability Preference, UAP, and I'll read to you what this is. In recent decades, high-demand neighborhoods have lost affordable housing and become increasingly out of reach to working families. The Universal Affordability Preference is a new tool that would allow buildings to add 20% more housing, but only if the additional units are affordable. This means that those units are geared for low-income families. So what's going to now happen between the many well-heeled New Yorkers who have left, the businesses that have left, and I know that Connecticut also has seen an influx of various New York businesses as well as New Yorkers. What's going to happen is New York is going to, and again, keep in mind that a third of the individuals replacing those who have left are migrants and refugees and very poor individuals who will need public assistance. So what's going to happen is that New York City is going to become a mecca for the poor. It's going to be a metropolis, a poor metropolis. And what this is going to do is drive out more individuals, more who are going to leave because of the influx of the migrants, more who are going to leave because of this decision. So essentially what he's doing is replacing the commercial property with affordable housing. So what this means is that New York City is going to be drastically changing, and that change has already started. And you've had, because of the migrant crisis, Governor Hochul reach out to President Biden, who just ignored the issue, and saying that something needs to be done. And they're right, because if New York declines, it's an indicator of the decline of the United States, because this is a trophy city of the United States. And if it declines and it goes down the tubes, then it doesn't say a whole lot for the rest of the nation. It's not a good indicator. And the fact that they're going to be turning many of the commercial properties into affordable housing, and I understand that there's a housing crisis, but this is a move that is literally going to cause a seismic tectonic shift in New York City. And you're going to have many of the affluent families just continuing to leave. What it's going to do is prosper other states. States such as Florida, Connecticut, New Jersey, and the northeastern states, and some of the southern states and Midwestern states that these individuals are fleeing to. And the more that New York makes these decisions, the more people are going to flee. But the migrant crisis right now is out of New York's hands. New York didn't ask for this crisis, but they have the law that states that everybody's provided a bed. And this is why these migrants have been sent and are looking at New York City as a destination. So now they're looking at revising this particular law. So let's take a quick look at what that law is. It's New York's right to shelter mandate, and anyone in need in the Big Apple is guaranteed a bed in the city's shelter system under New York's decades-old right to shelter, according to the New York Post. So this is now being changed because the influx is so great. It is overwhelming the shelters. The Roosevelt Hotel has been turned into an asylum center, and there's just all kinds of disastrous stories because of the influx of migrants. So this is a real development that's going to have an effect on the United States as a whole, because New York also brings in a good number of tourists every year. And the tourists are still coming, but there's going to come a point when that's going to drop off as well, as the city changes and no longer has the luster that it once had, and no longer has the attributes of being one of the greatest cities in the world. Instead, it's going to become a mecca for the poor, and it's going to be a destination where those on limited incomes are going to want to go because there's going to be all of this housing. I understand that there's many people who struggle, but there needs to be in any community a balance of the affordable housing as well as the tax-paying individuals, because let's face it, the tax-paying individuals are paying for this housing. So if you're going to have this much of it in a city, and you're going to then drive out the taxpayers because of all different decisions, which I have to say the migrant crisis is dumped on New York, although it's their right to shelter mandate that got them into trouble kind of to begin with this. But the city is set to really change. So we're going to definitely keep an eye on New York, because New York is a barometer for the United States, again, being a very great city. And we're hearing other horror stories coming out of New York. People shooting dope and shooting drugs right in the streets, needles hanging out of their arms. And you're hearing other horror stories, not only in New York, but also in San Francisco, Los Angeles, the housing crisis that's going on in California. This is pretty bleak. It's pretty bleak, the landscape now that's happening, or the picture that's emerging within famous U.S. cities. So we're going to keep an eye on this at this channel. Hope you found this informative. If you want to get this message out, there will be a PayPal link below to donate for promotion for this video. Mark that you want the donation to promote this news. On the Twist News, you decide the news that you want out there, and you decide it with your donations. And moreover, if you don't subscribe, hit that subscribe button today, and be sure to check out our Amazon store. Till next time, stay tuned.